Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk. My name is Zach Allen. I'm the Senior Director of Threat Intelligence at ZeroFox. And for today, I'll be talking about my phishing kit burn book. So we have a lot of content to go through, and I'm excited to talk about it. And I split this talk up into 4 parts. The first part, I'm going to be talking about the phishing ecosystem, and I'm going to try to convince everybody here that phishing is more than just a page and more than just account takeover. There's a lot of things that kind of go into it. Next, I'm going to be doing a threat actor case study. So all of the lessons that we've learned from the phishing ecosystem portion, we're going to apply that and study a threat actor and a group of people that perform phishing at a really, really large scale. Afterwards, I'm going to talk about a year in review, where I'm going to look at different open source kind of stats and metrics behind phishing and phishing kits. Spoiler alert, there's not really a lot, or they're not as accurate as they could be. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about a tool that me and my company built called Fishpond to help everybody here do research and defense against phishing using this new tool. So let's get started. So for my apply side, I want to make sure that by the end of this talk, everyone here should be able to understand the criminal economy behind phishing campaigns and to be able to safely hunt, identify, and reverse engineer some novice level phishing kits. So within 3 months, if you continue on a phishing research journey, and I hope everybody here does, because it's a lot of fun and there's a lot of different components to it, you'll be able to safely identify and reverse engineer some advanced phishing kits, and we'll look at some of those today. Accurately attribute kits to actors based on some net new indicators within the kit, so not really traditional threat indicators, something a little bit different. And then lastly, share the findings with the phishing research community, because everybody wants that clout, but it's also because we really need a lot more data to help kind of bring all of these different components together and understand this ecosystem as a whole. So the phishing kit ecosystem. Phishing attacks are way more than just a website, and I'll be saying that a lot throughout the presentation here. But before we begin, I want to scope this. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to be talking about phishing as it pertains to cyber criminals that are doing spam for the end goal of fraud. And they do that by stealing personally identifiable information and financial information via a web server deployed on the internet. Now, phishing that's not in scope, but you'll kind of see phishing go hand in hand with some of these other topics, include spear phishing, which you'll see a lot in like APT campaigns and things like that. Any type of malware or maldoc spam where it infects the user using that type of delivery system. Sometimes you hear people say phishing along those lines. And then lastly, business email compromise. Already a very hard topic to identify and really define. And I've seen phishing be used within the context of BEC, but I would not be talking about BEC during this talk. So for those that are defenders, researchers, and hey, maybe even attackers too, you've probably seen a URL like this before, whether you're responding to a ticket or you're building something out, a WordPress server. And at the end of that WordPress server, there's a WP includes folder with some gibberish afterwards, and then perhaps something like a brand like Proton Mail. And I'm going to pick on them a little bit, but I love Proton Mail. And when you look at this, you think like, why is there Proton Mail and index.php after this? It's most likely a phishing page. And then for the astute kind of researchers and defenders, they'll notice that there's multiple directories leading to that phishing page. And so you navigate a directory up. And sometimes you get this, which is an open directory. You'll see the Proton Mail directory that you can click and go to the phishing site, and then some type of zip file. Congratulations, you found a phishing kit. So it may look something like this. You can right click, save link as, download it locally. I run 7-zip all the time, so I list the contents here. And what you see, and what I have on the screen here, is a collection of PHP files, HTML, assets like JavaScript, CSS, maybe some pictures, and then maybe some TXT files in there as well. This is a phishing kit, and this is what Fishpond is going to help everyone here analyze in a lot more streamlined fashion. So a phishing kit really is just pre-constructed code, which allows quick deployment of phishing sites. It's that zip file. They're sold and traded online. And there's actually some tiers related to phishing kits. There's some lower tiered stuff that's not that advanced. And there's some higher priced kits that are very modular they have APIs, they have different ways to exfiltrate stolen data, and some of them even have digital rights management and licensing attached to them. And they are very popular because there's potentially high return on investment for threat actors. This allows people to quickly stand this stuff up without really knowing what's going on, because all they care about is getting it on a server, sending something out, and then reaping the benefits from that phishing attack. So my company's been doing phishing research for quite some time, and whatever we're looking at, a threat actor or a group of people doing this, they tend to fall into a couple of buckets, which I have listed here: the operator, the developer, an infrastructure broker, and an illicit market. And so it could be any combination of these types of personas, but the basic premise behind all this is everyone's in the phishing game to make money. They're in it to do fraud. And so the operator, they purchase the kit from a developer, they obtain different ways to spam that kit out, they deploy it, and then they reap the benefits. The developer builds the kit, hosts it, takes feature requests, which I'll show a little bit in a slide coming up here, and they keep improving it so more operators buy it. There's infrastructure brokers that basically obtain infrastructure to perform some type of spam. They'll do this illicitly through carding, through fraud, or in that WordPress example, through compromise. And then a market. And this market doesn't have to be on the dark web or some secret crazy place that you have to go know a secret handshake. This could be on the internet. This can be on social media. This can be on WhatsApp or Telegram. All of these things together are basically the ecosystem of fraud when it comes to phishing kits. So I want to talk a little bit about what it takes to make a phishing campaign. And so I'm going to zoom in here on the operator. Basically, this is going to complete something called a flywheel, and it's going to go in a circle here because the more the operator does this, the better they get. So I'll step through each portion here. So the operator first identifies a place they can go and buy or sell financial information or personally identifiable information. So that's a really important step, is just go to a place and see where this is being sold. Once they figure out what's being sold, they'll buy a phishing kit. They'll also buy perhaps some infrastructures, some lists to spam out emails or phone numbers. They'll buy something called a letter, which is basically a prepackaged piece of HTML that is guaranteed to get past the spam filter on email. Sometimes they don't work, most of the time they do. Once all those purchases are done, they then deploy the kit. They get the virtual private server. When they get on that VPS, they install a web server and a LAMP stack with PHP, and they take that zip file and they copy it on there. And that's where we can get that really juicy intel and that juicy fish kit, is when they copy it and they forget about it. So once they copy it over and they extract it, they have a payload that they build either through this letter template or through some type of SMS spamming service where they can text out the phishing link. They initiate the campaign, so they'll press a button and basically emails and text messages go out. Victims get it. Victims navigate to the phishing website. The kit is really good at blocking any type of automated and security scanners. And then the victim starts filling in the data. And then the last part is the operator collects the loot. This can be done through a number of different ways, which I'll show in my demo. And they can take that information and put it somewhere so they can retrieve it and then go and list it within that identify step that you see here. So it's really important when you're looking at any type of phishing page or you're doing phishing kit research that you look at what we like to call at ZeroFox the victim workflow. It's basically the user experience of the phishing kit. So if I plop two things right here, this is a Cash App on the left and then a phishing kit targeting Cash App on the right. Really, without access to the domain or the source code, if you're not that good at analyzing this, it's really hard to tell the difference between the two. That's because these developers rather, they spend a lot of time to make sure this looks exactly like the brand that they are targeting. And then each page is uniquely built so they can take the right information based on that brand. So we have the cash pin on the left here. We're getting the email and the email password on the right. And then this is where it gets interesting. A phishing page is usually a username and password, right? Well, a lot of these pages and a lot of these kits, they start to take a lot more than just usernames and passwords. On the left, you'll see a lot of PII, which includes everything from your name, address, and your social security number. And then on the right includes your debit card, credit card, routing, and bank account number. This is a lot different than what I was taught initially with phishing. This begins to kind of build up something more and more into what's called a profile. So a profile or a pro is what you'll see some of these actors talk about when they have a really good package of this PII and FI that they can sell to somebody so they can go and use that fraudulently. So really, we do need to educate security practitioners and researchers that phishing is not always just equaling to usernames and passwords. These are pre-packed identity compromise toolkits. And so, for example, you'll see here, the last portion of this phishing page, it asks you to upload your driver's license. That whole package is a really good thing to have if you need to beat KYC or know your customer protections at a bank, at a credit card website, or things like that. So this is a lot of information that you can get, and it's really useful to basically compromise somebody's financial livelihood. Now, I'm not saying that all phishing pages are this. I'm not saying all phishing, some phishing pages are username and password. I'm saying there's a spectrum here. So basically what I'm showing here is a Shopee profile of somebody who sells usernames and passwords for Nando's Peri Peri, the chicken restaurant. And for $5 to $10, you can purchase a username and password from this person, log in to Nando's Peri Peri, and they'll give you instructions to say, like, here's how you go and order a lot of food with this $10 credential I just sold you. So I can spend $10 to get $100 worth of food. This might be really attractive for people. And they have over 2,000 purchases here. 2,200 of them are very positive. So it really depends on the threat model of the organization. It really depends on the brands and what you can get from it. And it really just depends also on where people are using this and kind of like the almost the life circumstances of the people within that region. So it's a very complicated subject. And this is not something we've really talked about, or I've seen people talk about enough within the security research community. So now that everyone here is totally an expert on phishing kits, I'm going to go and look at a specific threat actor called 16Shop. And the interesting thing about this, and I want everyone to take away, is to kind of understand that geopolitics is a very important part of any type of fraud research. And when looking at this kit, you can't really look away from how some of fraud within this area of the world came to be. So really, how some of the fraud in this area of the world came to be was that there was a very notable person called the Bali Bomber in Indonesia, and they wrote a book after they were caught called Hacking Why Not. And within the book, they basically urged Muslim radicals to engage in holy war in cyberspace by doing what? Performing credit card fraud. And so within that chapter, you see a lot of different methods to perform that credit card fraud and to basically use this as a way to attack the US. So years and years later, a bunch of phishing kits and groups started to emerge from Indonesia. And in my opinion, 16Shop is kind of like the king of all of them. It's the biggest that we've seen. And one person has been attributed to running it, and their moniker is Devil Scream. And this was first attributed in 2018 by Akamai. And this person's been around a lot, like within the Zone H defacing scene. And it was really hard not to attribute to Devil Scream, because Devil Scream not only put their name inside the phishing kits and signed it, he put in where they can go if you find this kit and you can buy more. He also put in his real name. So it just kind of goes to show, this is an enterprise, and people and these developers need to sell these things, so they have to market themselves. Now, whether that's an operational security faux pas, I do not know, but it was definitely effective in terms of making it popular. So when you go to 16Shop, it's not on the dark web. You don't have to know Indonesian. You don't have to know a secret handshake. It's on the open web. And if you know what the URL is, you can go and register a free account and start buying phishing kits related to the brands below. So once you register and you log in, you'll see that it's set up almost like a SaaS product. It's very, very easy to kind of look at and understand, like, where can I buy these things? Where can I get a guide? It even has a support portal at the bottom. Now, one thing you'll see with a lot of these phishing kit researchers, or phishing kit actors rather, is that they don't call them kits. They call them scams or scam pages. So what you see here is a way to buy an Apple scam page for about $70 US. And you could pay them in cryptocurrency, or if you're in Indonesia, you could just do a direct bank wire transfer to Devil Scream's bank account, which I thought was pretty funny. They have a user guide, so you can see ways that you can upload that zip file to your hosting and file manager. As you can see here, it shows what happens if there's any errors that happen. In this particular case, not only do you buy the license for Apple, you only get 3 domains you can host that Apple kit at a time. 16 Shop is set up almost like an API where you won't actually see a lot of the phishing pages within the kit itself. The API server feeds it back to these pages in real time as people visit them. So it's a pretty unique setup here. Once the page is set up, it'll show you how to log into your page by going to /admin. So this is a very interesting thing if you're doing research. If you go to /admin and you see a 16 Shop logo, it's most likely a 16 Shop phishing page. And then when you do log in, you'll get a nice, pretty dashboard of all the different metrics and all the different victims and driver's license you found. You can configure your phishing kit in here. So it's very well built. And it's just something that is interesting to study because it's just so advanced. It has DRM, it has this setup with dashboards and things like that, and it has user guides. So definitely something to consider more and more when you're going out and you're looking at these things. Now, in terms of the impact, 16 Shop is a pretty crazy operation. URL Scan identified around 8,000 16 Shops websites in 2020. Neon Primetime, who I'll talk about in a little bit, has pulled 1,200-ish zip files that are 16 Shop within 2020. So not just the site, but they found a zip file within there. And then just in the last 3 months alone, my company's collected over 3,000 of these 16 Shop zip files. And then just last year, we're talking about like close to 100,000 different domains that we've tracked. So it's pretty crazy in terms of the amount and the impact that these different sites have. Great. So now that everyone here is an expert in phishing kits, we talked about one threat actor. The question then becomes, well, how many more are there out there? And how can we track them? And what brands do they affect? And how effective are they? I'm about to disappoint people here a little bit. There's not a lot of good data on this. So for those that don't know, the Anti-Phishing Workgroup is a fantastic place to go for this type of phishing data. People submit phishing URLs and domains and emails and things like that to the Anti-Phishing Workgroup, and they track it by brands and they track it by site. And you can kind of see their 2020 phishing activity here. There's an initial dip in March and then started to go up and up and up throughout the year. So, you know, hundreds of thousands per quarter is basically what they've tracked, but no data on any zip files or kits or who is behind any of this. Next, URL Scan. And if you don't know what URL Scan is, everyone needs to go check it out. It's a really awesome tool to do phishing research, and it's free. You can go there and get some stats related to these phishing domains and phishing URLs. So they sent me over some things in terms of the amount of domains and URLs that they've classified. And so it's about right around 1 million phishing URLs that they classified last year. But the really cool thing was they also put in the number of unique brands. Anti-Phishing Workgroup had that as well. So at least we have some type of brand data to measure impact here. But the question really is here is, what about kits? What about those zip files in that one open directory? Do we have anything on that? And there's not much. So Neon Primetime, if you don't know who that is, great researcher, go give them a follow on Twitter. They run a open source project called the PhishKit Tracker, which you can see here on GitHub. And they've collected about 2,000 phishing kits total across GitHub, VirusTotal, and Twitter in 2020. And only 3% of those had brand classification. So we had a bunch of phishing kits, but they're not classified in terms of which brand that they were affected. So we have the opposite problem now. And of all the phishing kits they got, they did some threat actor tracking and campaign tracking. And the majority of them were 16 Shop, as you can see on the right here. And then a lot of them just weren't labeled. So it's still a very fuzzy area in terms of tracking these different campaigns. And funny enough, if you look on the right, Freaks Brothers, Hijal, Young Sister, all of those are also Indonesian-based phishing kits. So I'm starting to see a pattern here in terms of some of these actors. So in terms of the open source need and the need just for more research around this, I took a stab of 3 things that we need to improve upon as a community. We need to be better at identifying new kits, and we need to be able to identify changes in TTPs and anti-analysis capabilities within these phishing pages. There's a lot of work that goes into preventing researchers and automated scanners to connect to these sites and analyze them. And without someone constantly looking at it, it's going to be really hard for us to really adjust as these attackers adjust. Next, victimology. So who are the most affected brands and why? We can see who, through these reports through Euro-Scan and Anti-Phishing Workgroup, but we can't really see the why. And the why is because we know what brands they go after, but it's not just usernames and passwords they're going after. They're taking more stuff there. So where is that data going after the victim falls for that phish? And then lastly, sharing and reporting. There just needs to be a better way to take something like that zip file in that campaign and put it somewhere so somebody can track it. The best I've seen so far are basically volunteers on Twitter. Go ahead and if you put in hashtag phishing or phishing kit, you'll see a lot of their research on there. And it's good data, but Twitter is definitely not the best thing when it comes to threat indicator sharing, though it has been pretty good for a number of things. So in an attempt to help out at least with the analysis part and that capability tracking part for these actors, we built PhishPond at ZeroFox. It's basically a malware sandbox, but for phishing kits. So the problem with phishing as I've seen it over the years is that we look at the domains and the IP addresses and the registrars and the VPS provider. Those are all great indicators of compromise, but it kind of falls flat on its face because it's just traditional whack-a-mole, think malware hashes. So if we can start kind of building upon other indicators by tagging a kit, for example, or looking at the different brands on a specific registrar or VPS where there's hundreds of these things, we can maybe start building out campaigns and understanding this stuff a lot better. So PhishPond makes that attempt to help defenders and researchers analyze these TTPs and start putting together these campaigns more. So it basically is a malware sandbox, but for phishing kits. It'll detonate the kit inside a web server. It's a Docker project that has man-in-the-middle proxy, a containerized browser, and a containerized web server, all looking through man-in-the-middle proxy. So you can sit there and watch traffic go through man-in-the-middle proxy. You can stop traffic, you can shape it, and it's all there for you to kind of play around with. It also has a lot of PHP shims that overrides normal PHP functionality to essentially neuter the kit as well. So in terms of what you can do and how you can use PhishPond, immediately, what I think you can do is find these exfiltration endpoints relatively quickly so you can see where the data is going. A lot of times it's going on the web server or it's going to an email address or things like that. You can also identify weaknesses in the phishing kit. So you can see if it's writing to a text file and that text file may contain metadata on victims. And so now if you identify that kit in the future and it's live, you can navigate to that text file in real time and pull down really good metadata. And then lastly, to be able to fingerprint either known kits or new kits. This is really important when it comes to hunting, because then we know what those weaknesses are and who it is, and we can start building up campaigns and cases against these actors. So we can take more action against them rather than just getting the site banned. So I'm going to go through 3 different videos here. I did not want to test the demo gods today with a live demo. And within these videos, I'll do some color commentary as they play. So it's going to be a Proton Mail phishing kit that I pulled from Hack9's repo. It's very straightforward. I modified them to make them a little bit more complicated with the other 2 demos, but hopefully at the end of this, you can kind of understand what my analysis workflow is with phishing kits, and you can use this accordingly to go and do your own research. Okay, so I'm going to press play here. So here's the open source repo. It's on GitHub. Feel free to go check it out. We try to document it as much as possible. It shows how to set it up for the first time, how to use it, and things like that. We also have a wiki on here with the same instructions for getting started, as well as a using PhishPond guide that will have a lot more instructions on how to use PhishPond to analyze these kits. So as you can see here, whether it's debugging, looking at traffic, browsing through the kit, things like that. So as you can see, there's a containerized Firefox browser, and you just have to navigate to localhost 5800. And once you're in there, go to phishpond.local. And phishpond.local is the containerized web server that has the phishing kit within it. So I'm pulling up my terminal here just to show you where I am within the directory path. So as you can see, demo, PHP info, welcome.php is here. And then if I go up one more, it'll just be the top level directory of the GitHub repo. So this is perfect. So I'm going to click into demo, and then I'm going to click into Proton Mail. Now I have 3 here, so I'll go through all 3 of these during the demo, and these will be on the GitHub repo for everyone to play around with once you see this presentation. So I'm going to click into Proton Mail. As you can see, it's a very simple Proton Mail phishing page. Firefox is already warning us this isn't over TLS, so be careful. And I want to kind of research this a little bit more. And because I pulled that zip file, I can research it. So the first thing I look at is index.php. This is basically where if there's a root kind of directory in a PHP deployment, it'll always try to look for index.php and load that. It'll load a file in a script called ip.php and do a redirection to login.html. So if I look at ip.php, this does some logging based on a couple headers that are present in the client. And then you'll notice that it writes that file out to ip.txt. So already I'm making a mental note in my head. If I see this phishing kit, do /ip.txt and it'll give me some victim info. Anytime I'm looking at a phishing page and doing research on this, I'm looking for forms. So just run that Command F or Control F, look for a form, and then look to see if you can find the login page here. And as you can see, method posts, this is probably going to be a post request with the credentials. You can also look up the action within the form to get the actual file that it sends that post request to, login.php. So all really good intel. This is that victim workflow that I was talking about. So login.php, it takes a post request of username and password, concatenates them together, and it writes it out to this file on the web server called usernames.txt. So this is really important intel for you as well, because although the operator can log in and get this, anybody can get in and get this as long as the operator didn't secure it correctly. A lot of times they have not. So one thing I'm going to do with man-in-the-middle proxy, I'm going to set up some filters for intercepting. So this is very much like Wireshark, and I love using man-in-the-middle proxy for this feature. I'm going to put in a filter to say if a method matches a post request, and if there's a header that matches location, go ahead and just pause execution and don't forward that HTTP packet out. So you can use this type of feature when you're going through and you're navigating through the kit to pause execution. I'm going to type in a username and password here, tester and tester, press login. It is frozen, and it is frozen because man-in-the-middle proxy caught a match and now paused it. As you can see here, it shows all of the headers that came from the phishing kit, as well as the post request that contains username and password. And it's paused here. And then you can also take a look at the response. So this is what the PHP server is responding with, that location 302 found, and it's forwarding the victim to mail.protonmail.com. So this is the full victim workflow of this particular kit. I pressed on pause here. I'm going to go back to the containerized browser, and there you go, mail.protonmail.com. So that's the full victim workflow for this particular kit. Now, for my next demo, I'm going to replace that file that we wrote our victims to with Telegram, a Telegram API call. We're starting to see a lot of Telegram be used lately for exfiltration at ZeroFox, not just phishing kits, but we're also seeing a lot with malware. So understanding and knowing when to deal with a Telegram exfil is going to be really important if you're analyzing these things. And luckily, we have a neat way of stopping Telegram in its tracks with Fishponds by using man-in-the-middle proxy modules, which I'll demonstrate here. So I'm back in fishpond.local. I click demo. I then go to the Proton Mail Telegram fish page. Looks very, very similar. But if I pull up the code, you'll notice that login.php was replaced. And instead of writing out to a text file, I'm URL encoding that string. And I'm going to call out to the Telegram API to send a message to a particular chat. Now, for those that are looking, this is all like garbage data. So they're actually like, this is not a real key. This is just kind of demonstrating what would happen if I go in and reach out to that with a real key. And we've used this rather effectively with legit keys. So here's the URL. And then it calls file get contents on that URL. So I'm going to put in my username and password again, which is not going to go to user.txt. I'm going to press login, and instead of pausing, it's going to forward me directly to Proton Mail. So this is good. And it looks like I skipped it here. I'm going to go back. Perfect. Okay, so I'm on man-in-the-middle proxy here, and I'm going to look for that GET request out to api.telegram.com. Now, I didn't pause it this time because we have a module, and you can go and check out the different modules that we have for man-in-the-middle proxy within the GitHub repo. Now, when this reached out, instead of going to api.telegram.org, Fishpond had a module that recognized something was going out to that domain, and instead gave it back a 201 created, which was what the script expected. And then it returned with log data to log/telegram.log. And lucky for us, there's a logs folder within the repo. And if you tail that Telegram log, you'll see in beautiful JSON here, the actual request as it goes out. Great. So for my last kind of demo here, I'm going to show an obfuscated phishing kit. So this is really important because this is how the developers for phish kits kind of protect their intellectual property, for lack of a better term. The problem is we control the code. If we control the code, we can de-obfuscate it with some tricks here. Now, the only thing with this particular type of analysis, if you jump on the wiki, go and set up the debugging kits, go to the README that has debugging kits, and it'll show you how to configure specifically Visual Studio Code to build something called a remote container and remote development container, and it'll actually connect into that container. You can drop your PHP breakpoints in there, and then as that server is executing that PHP, it'll drop into that breakpoint, which is really neat, and it helps out a lot when it comes to these techniques. So as you can see here, I'm just going through the README and how to set it up, but let's do it for real this time. So I'm already in Proton Mail obfuscated, and I'm going to switch over to VS Code. Now, if you follow the instructions, you'll be presented with a new VS Code window. And then on the left, if you can see right here, there's the debugger. I'm going to drop into login.php, and I can see that I see some obfuscated PHP code, like variable names that don't make sense, weird base64 decoded stuff. Instead of going through this manually and like kind of rip and replacing things, and I've done this a bunch, I'm just going to use a debugger because then I can just inspect the values in real time. So I'm going to go to line 1. I'm going to turn on a breakpoint here. And as you can see, that's a breakpoint. I'm going to click listen, and you should see a little pop-up here that says the remote extension debugger is working on port 9000, and you'll see the color at the bottom turn to orange, which means it's ready to hit that breakpoint. I'm going to go back to the containerized browser, put in my test, and instead of man-in-the-middle proxy stopping execution, now I have Visual Studio stopping this execution. And I can see line by line what these different values are going to be. So as I skip over, you'll see that that particular line brought in account and password from that post. I also have some type of API to telegram.org string. I'm creating some stream context for an HTTP call in PHP. Just some really nice debugging features that's all in one place, and it's very visual. This has saved my team a lot of time as we were kind of stepping through some of these more complicated phishing pages and phishing kits. I'm going to step over everything here. You can kind of see everything. I also noted the super globals for PHP, and go back just a little bit. You can actually pull apart the post request, what the server has, the different headers and things like that. So it's just a very useful thing to step through this. And thank goodness they chose PHP for the most part when using phishing kits. So I pressed step over and then resume, and then I got forwarded on the phishing kit from my page to mail.protonmail.com. So you can see that victim workflow still working all the way through. But instead of the analysis technique where I'm looking at it in man-in-the-middle proxy, or I'm looking at it log files, or I'm looking at it through man-in-the-middle proxy modules, I'm now looking at it through Visual Studio Code. Okay, so next slide. So in conclusion, I hope you liked the presentation. We spent a lot of time kind of building this stuff up. We use Fishpond a lot. And I'm going to have a call to action here. If it's interesting for you, reach out to me on Twitter, or reach out to anybody you see posting the hashtag phishing or hashtag phishing kit. If you need help analyzing something, or if you have a new sample, almost everybody there is happy to take a look at it for you. But The big conclusion points from the talk are listed right here. Just make sure that you know that phishing and fraud, they do go hand in hand, and it's more than just usernames and passwords for a lot of these things. And that's because these phishing kits, they can take technically unskilled operators and give them the ability to use really complicated advanced features to attack end users. Fraud is geopolitical. So just like we looked at the threat actor case study, putting some time in to look at where these developers and operators are can give you a lot better insight into why they're operating and allows you to kind of level up as a researcher. Kits do have plenty of this unused intelligence. So instead of the IP address and the domains, which are all great to have, you saw that I had in there some text files I can look at. I had some APIs that I talked with on Telegram, and I can get Telegram API keys to go and do additional pivoting. So it's useful almost immediately is what I'm trying to say here. And then lastly, contribute to open source. We definitely need a lot more data, and we need a lot more eyes on this. And I'm happy to answer anything. You reach out to me on Twitter. And like I said before, anybody else on those hashtags will do it as well. So that concludes my talk. Thank you everyone for coming. And I know that hopefully you'll be typing some questions throughout the talk here, and I was answering it in real time. I hope I did an okay job. And I think we should have a little bit more time to take some more questions. Thank you.